before Olympus echoed with thunder, before the halls of Valhalla rang with steel, before the prophets walked deserts and named heavens, there was Africa. A land where divinity was not imagined in war, but in rhythm. A continent where gods did not wage battles for dominion, but danced in harmony as facets of one eternal force. Here, the sacred did not demand allegiance to one name. It invited understanding of many. Every tree, river, mountain, and storm carried a presence. Not because nature was worshipped, but because nature was known to be alive, inhabited by spirit, echoing the divine. Long before the word Pantheon was ever spoken, Africa had already mapped the divine. The people of the Nile, the forests of Ife, the hills of the Shona, the shores of the Home, they understood something deep, something elemental. That the universe was not a hierarchy of jealous gods, but a song sung in layers. One breath, many voices. One source, countless expressions. This is not mythology in the Western sense. These are not tales of fantasy or superstition. What you are about to discover is cosmological architecture. Sacred science encoded in symbol, ritual, and rhythm. It is a metaphysical map designed to align humanity with the cosmos, not through fear, but through harmony. The names may differ: Olodumare, Atum, Nzambi, Ngai, Mwari, but they all point to the same summit, the One. From there, the divine descended, not in confusion, but in order. From sky to earth, from spirit to matter, from silence to word. This is the hidden order of the gods, a map of creation, forgotten, not lost. And now, we begin the journey back to remembrance. At the foundation of every African spiritual system lies a truth older than writing, older than temples, older than names, that there is one, a supreme power, self-existent and uncreated. This source is not a god among gods, but the divine totality from which all things emerge. It does not wear a face, demand a temple, or speak in one tongue. It is known not through image, but through presence. Felt in the hush of mountains, the rhythm of rain, and the silence between breaths. To the Yoruba, this power is called Olodumare, the supreme being, the breath behind all destinies. Olodumare is not worshipped directly in ritual because it is beyond petition or form. The Yoruba say, no one knows the path to Olodumare's house, meaning the true nature of this source is beyond comprehension. Yet everything flows from it. The Igbo call it Chukwu, the great spirit, both the essence and architect of existence. Chukwu is light before light, the one who set the sun and moon in motion and endowed all life with chi, a divine spark. Among the Akan of Ghana, the same concept appears as Nyame, the sky god, the supreme, who delegates creation to divine intermediaries. In the Congo traditions, Nzambi Mpungu reigns, the power above all, associated with the sun, with life, with justice. Among the Gikuyu and Maasai of East Africa, the supreme is Ngai or Nkai, dwelling upon sacred mountains, speaking through thunder, unseen yet always near. In the Nile Valley, long before monotheism became a theological debate, the ancient Kemites spoke of Atum, the self-created one who emerged from the waters of chaos and gave birth to the first gods. Atum was both origin and destiny, the end within the beginning. This was no anthropomorphic deity, it was the principle of divine becoming. In later teachings, Atum's unity would unfold into Ra, into Ptah, into Amun, but always pointing back to a singular source. Despite their regional differences, these names reflect the same understanding, that there is one source beyond human traits, beyond gender, beyond limitation. This source is not male or female. It is both and neither. It does not dwell in a heaven far removed, but in every particle of creation. It is in the pulse of the drum, the breath of a newborn, the silence of the ancestors. African traditions never needed to reduce the divine to a single image because they already knew the one could never be captured. Yet this one does not stand alone in the silence of the void. From it flow manifestations, not lesser gods but aspects, functions, intelligences that shape the universe into form. In Africa's sacred thought, oneness gives rise to multiplicity not through conflict but through harmony. Like a beam of light passed through a prism, the one radiates into many, each reflection part of the same brilliance. This foundational concept, a supreme, unknowable source that expresses itself through divine forces, is what makes African spirituality both monotheistic and pluralistic. It recognizes hierarchy without division. It honors the many without forgetting the one. And it insists that all things, from the highest star to the deepest root, are part of the same divine field. So whether one prays to Olodumare, or listens to the voice of Nzambi in the river, or gazes at the mountains where Ngai dwells, all are reaching toward the same center. This is not about worshipping many gods, but relating to one divine reality in its many forms. The African Pantheon is not a council of rivals. It is a choir of harmonics, each voice essential, each tone part of the song of existence. One source, known by many names, gave breath to all divine order. If the supreme source is the eternal flame, then the first emanations are its sparks, divine intelligences, not separate from the source, but unfolding expressions of its creative will. Across Africa, these emanations are the architects of reality, the builders of balance, the keepers of elemental law. They are not gods in conflict, but principles in concert. They do not compete. They complete. Where the source remains unseen and unshaped, these forces become visible, tangible, and intimate, the bridge between the infinite and the formed. In Kemet, these divine functions were known as the Neteru, sacred principles encoded in story, symbol, and ritual. Shu was air, the invisible space between things. Tefnut, the moisture that makes life possible. Geb, the earth, solid and grounded. Not, the sky, arched in eternal embrace. Together they formed the first structure of the cosmos, not as myth, but as spiritual physics. The Neteru were not distant deities to be feared, but universal laws to be aligned with. Asa represented regeneration and moral kingship. Aset, divine wisdom and sacred motherhood. Tehuti, the principle of truth, writing, and cosmic language. And Ma'at, more than a goddess, was the equilibrium that held all things in harmony. Justice, truth, balance, reciprocity. To live in Kemet was not merely to worship the gods, it was to participate in their order. In Yoruba cosmology, these divine functions emerged as the Orisha, each one a sacred force, embodying an aspect of creation and consciousness. Obatala, the sculptor of human form, shaped bodies from clay. Ogun, the blacksmith of existence, forged tools, paths, and transformation. Yemoja, mother of oceans, held the mysteries of birth, emotion, and divine nurture. Shango, god of thunder and justice, brought fire and balance to the realm of men. The Orisha are not confined to legend. They are living energies felt in rivers, storms, forests, and within human personality. They represent principles that are cosmic and psychological, natural and moral. In every ritual offering, drumbeat, and dance, the Orisha are called not as external beings but as forces already woven into life. In the Vodun traditions of the Homi and its diaspora, these divine emanations are known as the Loa. They are intermediaries, guides, and gatekeepers of the divine. Legba, the opener of all doors, controls the crossroads, the space where choice and destiny meet. Aizan, guardian of markets and knowledge, is the law beneath the visible. Ogun, the warrior and craftsman, echoes Ogun but with a distinctly martial and revolutionary presence. The lower are not fictional spirits. They are sacred codes passed down in song, ceremony, and possession. In Haiti, in Benin, in the blood memory of millions, the lower speak through rhythm and fire, through dreams and trance. They are not worshipped as gods above. They are communed with as spirits beside. In Central Africa, particularly among the Bakongo, the Nkisi serve as the spiritual embodiments of divine forces. The Nkisi are not deities but sacred vessels, objects, icons, and charms that house spiritual energy. They are animated by Nzambi Mpungu, the supreme source, but activated through intention, invocation, and ancestral permission. A Nkisi can protect, heal, curse, or reveal. Some dwell in rivers, others in trees, others in carved wood or iron. They function not through blind belief but through precise ritual science, aligning human action with the rhythm of the unseen. And like the Orisha and the Loa, each Nkisi reflects an elemental domain: water, fire, soil, wind, memory. What ties all these systems together is their profound understanding that creation was not a singular event, but an ongoing process, one that required multiple principles working in harmony. The source, in its vastness, could not interact directly with the material world, so it divided itself into intelligences, each with a role, an element, a signature. Fire was not just a chemical reaction. It was Shango, it was Ogun, it was Sekhmet. Water was not simply H2O, it was Yemoja, Asase Ya, or Mami Wata. Air was Shu, earth was Geb, speech was Tehuti. Each force was a face of the divine, not separate gods, but specialized expressions. This is why African spiritual systems are often misunderstood by outsiders as polytheistic in the Western sense, as if people were worshipping many rival gods. But the truth is far more refined. These are sacred functions, not factions. Just as light divides into the colors of the spectrum, or music breaks into harmonies, the divine divides into roles, all flowing from the same origin. Each culture names and relates to these roles differently, but the pattern is consistent. There is a source, and from it emanate principles that build, sustain, and guide reality. So whether one calls upon Eset or Oshun, Legba or Esu, Ogun or Ogun, they are not calling on different gods. They are invoking the same primordial intelligences through different doors in different languages. And in doing so, they affirm one of the oldest truths on earth. Across the continent, creation began with emanation. One power in many forms. Let's journey across the continent north to south to witness how one sacred structure speaks 1,000 dialects. Though languages change, landscapes shift, and symbols evolve, the divine pattern remains remarkably intact. From the desert temples of Kemet to the riverbanks of the Congo, from the mountains of Kenya to the ancestral hills of Zimbabwe, Africa's spiritual systems speak in harmony. The names may differ, but the design, the sacred order, is the same. We begin in the northeast, where the Nile flows like a divine artery. In Kemet, ancient Egypt, the divine was not imagined as distant or tyrannical, but as an active principle woven into the cosmos. The Neteru, as discussed, were not simply gods, but universal forces. Ra, the sun, traveled across the sky each day and descended into the underworld each night. A symbol not just of light, but of life's eternal cycle. Ma'at, the embodiment of truth and balance, was not a passive goddess, but the foundation of society and the cosmos. Everything, from governance to morality, had to align with Ma'at to remain in harmony. To the south, the divine structure continued in Kush and Nubia. which were not mere reflections of Egypt but independent spiritual powers in their own right. In Nubian temples we find Apedemak, the lion-headed god of strength and warfare, a being both fearsome and noble, protector of kings and guardian of divine authority. Amani, the great mother goddess, symbolized fertility, creation, and the earth's sacred power. Sebiomeka, guardian of thresholds, mirrored the concept of divine passage and transition, not unlike the role of Legba or Esu in West Africa. These deities were often worshipped in temples filled with both Egyptian and local artistic styles, showing not only theological connection but cultural conversation. The Nile did not just carry water, it carried cosmology. Moving into East Africa, we find another expression of the sacred source. Among the Gikuyu, Maasai, and Baganda, the supreme being is known as Ngai, Enkai, or Katonda. These are not minor tribal gods. They are high deities associated with sky, thunder, rain, and divine authority. Ngai for the Gikuyu lives atop Mount Kenya, a holy site where heaven touches earth. Enkai for the Maasai is both male and female, a divine androgyny that reveals the unity of all dualities. Katonda, among the Baganda, is not just the creator, but the sustainer, embodying order in both the material and spiritual realms. Here, divinity was rooted in nature and covenant. Rain was more than water. It was a sign of blessing. Thunder was not just weather. It was Ngai's voice. Sacred groves and mountains served as living altars where humans could commune with the divine without walls or idols. This connection to the land was not symbolic. It was literal. The environment itself became the temple. As we move into the heart of Africa, the cosmology becomes more layered, more secular. In the spiritual systems of the Congo and Angola, the universe is a loop, not a line. The Bakongo understood existence through the concept of the Kalunga line, the boundary between the physical and spiritual world. Life, death, and rebirth formed an eternal cycle, much like the sun crossing the horizon or Ra's journey through the Duat. At the top of this cosmology stands Nzambimpungu, the supreme source, and like Olodumare, not often called upon directly. Instead, spiritual work was done through Simbi, water spirits, guardians of nature and messengers between realms. Some Simbi dwell in rivers, others in dreams, others in sacred trees or stones. Rituals were not theatrical, they were precise, calculated acts of balance. Through Nankisi, spirit-filled objects, the divine was harnessed and directed. Healing, protection, justice, all operated within this spiritual technology. The Congo tradition demonstrates that African spirituality was not only intuitive and poetic, but profoundly systematic. In West Africa, the divine structure flourishes with the richness of names and systems, yet always within the same sacred hierarchy. In Nigeria, the Yoruba speak of Orisha. In Benin and Togo, the Iwi and Fon speak of Vodun. In Ghana, the Akan speak of Abusum. Each of these systems honors a supreme source. Olodumare, Mawulisa, Oniame, and then a host of divine intelligences who govern the elements, the seasons, and the moral fabric of the world. The Orisha of the Yoruba include Shango, the god of thunder and justice, Oshun, goddess of sweetness and rivers, Ogun, the iron-wielding pathmaker, Obatala, the wise creator of form, and Yemoja, mother of oceans and wombs. In Vodun, these same principles reappear in different forms. Hevioso for thunder, Aizan for initiation and law, Agwe for sea, Danbala as the serpent of wisdom. Among the Akan, Tano rules over rivers and war, while Asaseya, the earth mother, governs fertility, death, and ethics. The roles are consistent: water, fire, fertility, justice, initiation, transformation. Yet each tradition names them according to its own tongue and context. The idea of spiritual intermediaries, sacred rhythms, and ancestral reverence unites all these West African systems. Offerings, drumming, trance, and divination are not eccentricities. They are tools for tuning into the divine structure. The drum is a voice, the dance is a prayer, the shrine is a portal, and at the center of it all is a harmony, a recognition that each deity is a frequency, a necessary tone in the chord of existence. Now we journey south into the vast plateaus and ancestral lands of southern Africa. Here the divine is remembered through lineage and land. Among the Zulu, the supreme being is Unkulunkulu, the great ancestor, the one who came from the reeds and gave humanity its laws and its breath. Modimo, among the Soto and Tswana, holds a similar place: creator, sustainer, moral compass. Among the Shona of Zimbabwe, the name is Mwari or Musikavanhu, the creator and the spirit within all life. Southern African spirituality places immense weight on ancestry, not in place of divinity, but as its reflection. The ancestors, Amadlozi Vadzimu, are not dead. They are living presences, guardians, and guides. They are the extension of divine principle into human memory. When a child is born, it is said to carry the spirit of those who came before. Rituals for rain, healing, and justice often invoke both the supreme and the ancestral chain, a sacred continuum of being. Even the land itself is sacred. Mountains, rivers, caves, all are touched by spirit. Shrines may be built of stone or of silence, but always serve as bridges between worlds. And so, from the deserts of Kemet to the plains of the Shona, we see not contradiction, but continuity. Each region developed its own names, symbols, and rituals, yet each reveals the same blueprint: a supreme source, creative forces, elemental powers, and ancestral presence. This is not coincidence, it is coherence. Africa's spiritual systems are not fragmented, they are fractal, repeating patterns of divine truth expressed through culture. Different tongues, one pattern. Supreme, creative principles, elemental forces, ancestors, the same sacred chain across the land. When we step back and look across the full spectrum of African spiritual systems, a profound pattern emerges, not a chaos of gods, but a deliberate order. This structure is more than theology. It is metaphysics, a map of how existence itself is organized. From the unseen heights of the Supreme Source to the heartbeat of living humanity, African cosmology is built upon a sacred hierarchy, a five-tiered chain of being that connects the divine to the dust, spirit to skin, eternity to the now. At the summit stands the Supreme Source, the one beyond time, space, and form. Whether named Olodumare by the Yoruba, Chukwu by the Igbo, Nyame by the Akan, and Zambi Mpungu by the Congo, or Atsum by the people of Kemet, this source is not a deity in the mythological sense, but existence itself. It is the breath before breathing, the silence before speech. This supreme is rarely worshipped directly because it transcends all relationship. It is not male or female. It has no face, yet it is the wellspring from which all divinity flows. In African cosmology, monotheism doesn't conflict with multiplicity, it births it. Below this source are the creative principles, the first emanations that shaped the cosmos. These are not the gods of storms or seas, but the architects of reality itself. In Kemet, Ra brought light into being and Ptah shaped thought into matter. Among the Fon and Yue, Mawulisa embodied cosmic polarity, male and female, sun and moon. The Yoruba speak of Obatala, the sculptor of human form, and Orunmila, the bearer of divine wisdom through Ifa. These beings are not mythic characters. They are laws in motion, patterns of creations expressing intelligence. Next come the elemental deities, those divine forces who govern the natural world and its rhythms. These include Sango, the thunderer and upholder of justice, Yemoja, the mother of waters and wombs. Ma'at, who weighs the heart and maintains balance. Tano, guardian of rivers and warfare. And Legba, opener of paths and master of thresholds. Each of these beings governs an element: fire, water, wind, forest, ocean, but also a moral or metaphysical quality: justice, fertility, transformation, joy. These deities remind us that nature is not a backdrop to human life. It is a manifestation of spirit. Then we arrive at the ancestral spirits, the honored dead who live beyond death. Known as Egungun among the Yoruba, Enkisi among the Bakongo, Amadlozi among the Zulu, or Vadzimu among the Shona, these ancestors are not ghosts. They are revered guides, protectors, and keepers of wisdom. They link the divine order to the human community. An ancestor is not simply someone who lived, it is someone who achieved spiritual clarity and continues to serve. They may visit through dreams, rituals, or possession, offering guidance and maintaining the moral order. Ancestors are the living memory of the sacred, not to be feared, but to be followed. And finally, at the base of this divine structure is humanity, not as separate from the divine, but as its embodiment. To be human in African cosmology is to be spirit clothed in matter. It is to carry within oneself the potential for divinity, to walk between worlds. This is why initiation, a ritual, and alignment with spiritual forces are so central, because the human being is not just surviving but remembering. We are the final tier in the hierarchy, and yet we are not the lowest. We are the active link between heaven and earth. We are the ones who enact divine law in the physical world. This 5-tier structure, from supreme source to creative principles, to elemental deities, to ancestors, to humanity, is not random. It is precision spirituality. It mirrors the descent of spirit into matter and the return of matter to spirit. It explains the role of ritual, the power of names, the sacredness of land, and the purpose of life. Every drumbeat, every libation, every carved mask, and a recited proverb participates in this order. This wasn't mythology, it was metaphysics, encrypted in symbol and ritual. In the sacred cosmology of Africa, duality is rarely framed as conflict. Instead, it is celebration. Two halves of the same breath. Masculine and feminine are not opposing camps vying for supremacy. They are equal emanations of the one. Where other traditions saw opposition, Africa saw balance, the secret of Ma'at. Take Isis and Osiris in ancient Kemet. Isis is the mother, magician, and resurrector. Osiris, the king, the earth lord, and judge of the dead. Together, they enact life, death, rebirth, a cycle of regeneration that mirrors nature itself. Isis gives the magic. Osiris gives the form. Neither can act alone. Their interplay is not war, but a cosmic embrace, teaching that creation is born in a relational movement and sacred partnership. In the West African Dahomey and Fon cosmology, we find Mawu and Lisa. Mawu, the quiet moon mother, Lisa, the blazing sun father. Together they embody the complete cycle of days, nights, growth, and rest. In their unity, there is no hierarchy, only complement. Their story affirms that the cosmos is built not on one power dominating another, but on two powers dancing in harmony. In the Yoruba tradition, we see this balance in the pairing of Oshun and Sango. Oshun, goddess of rivers, beauty and sweetness, nurtures and heals. Sango, god of thunder and justice, wields the fire of transformation and accountability. Their relationship demonstrates two poles of divine energy, the gentle and the fierce, each necessary. The feminine does not yield to the masculine. The masculine does not suppress the feminine. They move as equals, each reflecting an aspect of the divine manifested in creation. In southern Africa, among the Shona people, we meet Mwari or Musikavanhu and the great Mother Earth power, in the way land, spirit, and ancestry intertwine. Here, creation is spoken of as the great-grandfather and Mother Earth working in tandem. To the Zulu, Unkulunkulu is the ancestor creator who emerged from reeds, yet even he depends on the spirit of the land, the mothers of generations, and the communal balance of life. Southern African spirituality recognizes that masculinity need not dominate and femininity need not be passive. They are threads interwoven, irreducible, and equal. This balance is not a mere theological statement. It is encoded in ritual, symbol, and everyday life. Fire drums and river songs evoke feminine and masculine forces in harmony. Masks and dances reveal that the spirit of the warrior contains the spirit of the mother. Statues and shrines speak not of domination, but of mutual maintenance. Gender is not the locus of power hierarchy, but the axis of unity. In many traditions, mothers and fathers share ritual space, as priestesses and priests stand together in sacred mediation. This is exactly what makes African metaphysics so potent, not the subjugation of one half by another, but the orchestration of both halves in cosmic music. And this orchestration matters deeply for the worldly and the unseen. When masculine principle stands alone without its feminine counterpart, you see tyranny, imbalance, neglect of the earth, social fracture. When feminine principle stands alone without its masculine counterpart, you see formlessness, drifting spirituality, loss of structure. African spiritual systems understood that polarity is power, not weakness. Fire with water, sky with earth, sword with cradle. Each pair mirrors the fractal geometry of existence as perceived by civilizations who knew that life was not built on conquest but on covenant. Thus, when someone invokes Osiris, they honor not only the king prince, but the mother who supported resurrection. When one calls on Sango, they honor not only thunder, but Oshun's river song. When the Shona dance for rain, they invoke the creator, the mother power, the ancestors all at once. This is not made for entertainment. It is ritual for alignment. It is recognition that the divine is entirely relational. In the sacred order of African cosmology, the divine is whole because it is many, and many because it is whole. Masculine and feminine are not opposites fighting for supremacy. They are partners crafting reality. Where other traditions saw opposition, Africa saw balance, the secret of Mahat. Then came the era of disruption. The vibrant symphony of African spiritual thought was interrupted not by darkness, but by dissonance, crafted by external power and internal fractures. In the heart of so-called modernity, the sacred order began to unravel. The divine framework that once resonated in stone circles, river shrines, and ancestral drums became defiled in the eyes of new masters. The god of iron path and transformation, Ogun, once heralded as the pathmaker and liberator, was recast as a devil in some evangelical narratives. His hammers and smelted iron became tools of heresy in the missionary mind. The ancestral and elemental rhythms that gave manifestation to divine order were rebranded as demonic, occult, or backwards, thus generating fear, shame, and rupture. In the coastal kingdoms and hinterlands alike, the sacred practices of Vodun, Loa, ceremonies trans communion with ancestors were outlawed, criminalized, misrepresented. In West Africa and the diaspora, colonial and missionary forces labeled these systems as voodoo or witchcraft, distorted them, relegated them to show business or horror tropes, thereby severing the living stream of culture. Shrines were destroyed. Sacred drums silenced. Deities were renamed or demonized. Rituals once held in full community life were reduced to shame in the public square. Entire indigenous systems of law, wisdom, and covenant were delegitimized. Traditional rituals were criminalized. In many places, ancestral gatherings, spirit possession, and divination were banned or prosecuted. Practitioners of African spiritual traditions found themselves labeled witch doctors, sorcerers, or devil worshippers in coordinated campaigns of cultural suppression. The spiritual vocabulary changed. What had been honor and alignment with nature became sin and disorder in the colonial template. Names were replaced. Gods became devils. Ancestors became ghosts to be feared. Knowledge hidden itself in silence, dance, drumming, song, and memory rather than in the open book. Yet, the Pantheon was not destroyed. It was fractured. The gods did not die. They went underground. In rhythm, in memory, in blood, they continued. The drum still beats. The names still tremble on lips. The knowledge became coded in songs, masked in festival, carried in the resilience of communities whose bodies were uprooted, but whose spirits endured. The sacred chain was broken in public view, but not in private devotion. In the Caribbean, the Americas, Africa, these traditions adapted, crept through missionary walls, hid in the folds of syncretism, survived in disguised celebration. The narrative of disruption cannot be told without recognizing the will to revive. The gods were overshadowed but not extinguished. Their order lies dormant, waiting for remembrance, for reclamation. The sacred architecture of the divine remains intact beneath the rubble. Now is the time for reconstruction, not of myths, but of memory. Because the colors were changed but not erased. The pattern remains. The Pantheon was fractured, but the spirits remained hidden in rhythm, memory, and blood. What was hidden was never lost. Across the African continent and throughout its diasporas, a subtle reawakening is brewing. A reclamation of the sacred, a revival of rhythm, a resurgence of memory. Through art, through scholarship, through spirit, the divine order once silenced is being recalled. Sculptors are carving ancestors into stone again. Performers are dragging drums out of silence. Scholars are dusting off manuscripts, reviving the myths and metaphors that kept the gods alive in the void. The Pantheon may have gone underground, but beneath the surface, the pulse never stopped. In galleries from Lagos to Johannesburg, from Accra to Dakar, young artists are weaving together ancient symbols and modern forms to map the spiritual matrix of Africa. Digital installations, performances, public rituals, these are not nostalgic reenactments, but living continuations of spiritual systems. As one article notes, reclaiming African spirituality is a full-blown cultural renaissance. In universities and cultural centers, indigenous knowledge scholars are rewriting the narrative. These traditions were never primitive. They were precise, holistic frameworks of life itself. Even everyday people are catching the wave. Because when the drum returns to the village square or the city rooftop, it says something. We remember. We remember the Ogun of the iron, the Oshun of the rivers, the Nzambi of the spirit world. We remember the ancestral circle, the memory stones, the sacred line between worlds. And in remembering, we reclaim. The divine order returns not by force but by recognition. Seeing the names, hearing the songs, feeling the stones underfoot. So if this restored something ancient within you, don't just watch, witness. Feel the presence of the source in your own breath. Honor the creator by reconnecting with your own inner divinity. Share this story, not as an academic footnote, but as living heritage. Comment below with what resonated. Share your cultural lineage, your reflections, your questions. Like this video to honor the ancestors. And subscribe to History Store, where every story rekindles Africa's divine flame. This is the hidden order of the gods, the architecture of creation itself.